Friends, we finally have an amazing opportunity to judge Hillary, Bill, Barack, Joe, and most importantly, Soros. And that's wonderful news. Here's what happened. You probably know that there's a statute of limitations for bringing someone to justice. Well, what that means is that after a certain amount of time passes, let's say someone stole something, if 10 years have gone by, you can't prosecute them for it anymore. You can prosecute within 3 or 5 years, but not after. Why is that? Honestly, I don't really know or understand, but that's what the law says. Analysts worldwide claim that because of this American restriction on punishment after some long period of time, after committing the crime, neither Hillary nor Obama nor Comey, Brennan, or Soros will be brought to trial. That's what they were saying back in 2016, so to speak. The statute of limitations for the crime is 5 years, and now it's already 2025, so 8 years have passed, so to speak, since the crime, if there even was such a crime. Well, for now, as they say, the court hasn't ruled, so the crime is only assumed, or suspected, yes. But the discovery that some of the evidence was hidden in the FBI. Well, all sorts of secret rooms, bags for burning, and so on, fundamentally and in a very good way changed the case. Now listen to the legal advisor and Fox News expert.
You know, there was never a conspiracy about Trump's collusion with Russia. There was a conspiracy to frame Donald Trump for collusion, and that's a criminal conspiracy. You know, Hillary came up with this hoax by approving a scheme proposed by her chief aide, Juliana Smith, to smear Trump by falsely claiming that he colluded with Russia. In one of her documents, she said, yes, we have no evidence of this. That's an admission. Now,
it's worth considering some key statements from the recently declassified Durham appendix because the details and the way they are presented are deeply concerning. For example, it says, quote, Clinton approved a plan proposed by one of her foreign policy advisors, Juliana Smith, to smear Trump by exaggerating the scandal related to Russian intelligence agencies interfering in the election process in favor of the Republican candidate. The report further adds, quote, Smith suggested that raising the issue of Putin's support for Trump to the level of an Olympic scandal would distract attention from the investigation into Clinton's emails. Then there's an email from Leonardo Bernardo of the Soros Foundation, which says, quote, this is an important story. Polarization is on the agenda. Julie says this will be a good long-term thing. Right now, it's good for momentum after the convention. Later, the FBI will add fuel to the fire. And yes, Obama was also mentioned in the report, adding even more weight to the consequences.
And these new documents confirm that Barack Obama was involved in a criminal conspiracy along with his CIA and FBI. And, you know, as part of their scheme, Obama pressured Comey to clear Clinton in her own email scandal, which he of course did despite the obvious and clear evidence of her crimes. And then later, Obama instructed Comey, Clapper, and Brennan, let's cover our tracks. We'll change the intelligence to say, yes, Russia interfered to help Trump, even though the real intelligence said the exact opposite. This is truly the dirtiest political trick in American history, and I believe it's a crime.
They also included the Steele dossier, partly funded by the Clinton campaign and Democratic National Committee in the 2017 intelligence assessment.
Yes, the declassified appendix mentions that Obama had no intention of tarnishing the final part of his presidency and his legacy with a scandal involving the main Democratic Party candidate. Adding, quote, to solve the problem, he put pressure on Comey, but so far without any pressure. Interestingly, just 3 days before the 2016 election, Obama accused the FBI of how they handled the investigation into Hillary's emails, stating that the information was incomplete. It is also mentioned in Durham's report. In August 2016, Brennan briefed Obama, Biden, Clapper, Comey, and other senior officials about their efforts regarding Russian interference, as well as the intelligence community's concerns about what the Clinton campaign was planning. But despite all this, just 6 weeks before leaving office, the former president reportedly, quote, ordered a new assessment which concluded that Russian President Vladimir Putin sought to help Trump in the election, to help win the election. Now, you might think this information is explosive, but what about accountability? This is where the arguments of the legal analyst come into play. So, let's listen to what he
said, I think this represents a large-scale criminal conspiracy involving many corrupt individuals, including those I've named. And I would consider fraud against the government, deprivation of rights under the guise of law, and most importantly, obstruction of justice. And the cover-up has been going on for many years, which extends the statute of limitations in any case and criminal matter.
Conspiracy. I let you listen longer on purpose, waiting for this statement. If you tried to hide something, then your crime is dated not by the day the crime was committed, but by the day it was discovered that you were hiding it. That is to our immense joy. This is an 8-year-old crime, which now officially continued from 2016 to 2025 and is dated accordingly. Let's hear from the experts again.
The clock actually starts ticking when intentionally concealed evidence is discovered, which happened recently. For example, the new FBI under the leadership of Kasha Patel just discovered incriminating documents in burn bags hidden inside the FBI. They found hard drives locked away by Comey. And attempting to hide or destroy evidence related to investigations is obstruction. And the last overt act in the conspiracy starts the clock.
Again, yes, that's a fair point. So,
all these people continued their criminal activity, well, literally up until yesterday, and this illegal activity is subject to prosecution. It's hard to prove guilt in America. It was done that way on purpose to make it difficult, but at least you can open
a case, and the statute of limitations is one of the main reasons why many people say this case won't make it to court. But there's another important issue worth mentioning. Proving an actual conspiracy isn't as easy as it seems. When several people are involved, each one can claim that they acted in good faith and without any malicious intent. And Dima Torzok, that's a tough wall to break in any courtroom. Without solid evidence, coordination, and intent, the legal bar becomes much higher. So, while the facts may look incriminating to the public, turning them into a conviction is a whole different
story. Now another twist to the vignette. And do you remember the Durham report? That special prosecutor Durham, and his report consisted of 2 parts. As it turned out, there was the part we heard and a secret part, and the Democrats just wouldn't release that secret part.
To be declassified. When the report came out in 2023, the appendix was conveniently classified. Senator Grassley has since insisted on making it public, but the Department of Justice cited, quote, sensitive information as the reason it remained sealed. Now that it's out, it's clear they were trying to
hide it. So much dirt, so many lies, so much forgery. This isn't the America we were rushing to, striving for, and wanted so much. But since we're already here, ladies and gentlemen, let's take part in restoring America, in bringing back the America we dreamed of. Remember who creates their own happiness. Yes, we do. Ourselves. By the way, many years ago on an Odessa beach, I was struck by the following sign. The rescue of a drowning person is the work of the drowning person himself. At that moment, it seemed strange, but later it became funny. It's even a bit offensive, right? But in fact, it's always true. We're here, and let's save America before it drowns, because we are
America. All right. At first, we were told that Antifa doesn't exist. They said it's just an idea, nothing more. Then they said, well, yes, they exist, but it's not a real movement or organization. They have no leaders, no structure, and of course, no money. Well, guess what? They lied. And now evidence is emerging. FBI Director Kash Patel just reported that the FBI is on the verge of uncovering the entire command structure and funding sources of Antifa. Traditional media and Democrat politicians were pushing exactly the same
version. No, there's no Antifa. It's a completely fictional organization. There's no Antifa. I don't even know what Antifa is as a group. There's no...
Antifa is not like far-right groups such as the Proud Boys or Oath Keepers. Compared to right-wing extremists, Antifa-related violence is rare.
Limited. For example, peaceful and visible. Antifa.
Subtitles. This is not an organization. In many ways,
mythology. It's not like the Proud Boys or Oath Keepers, you know, those specific terrorist organizations with leadership that leads to violence.
Antifa doesn't exist. It's clearly just a myth. And there were no Hunbabens and no Red Mares either.
Either to be continued.
This is not a highly organized movement. It's a nickname. It's not a single group like the Proud Boys. Things like Antifa are things that are made up.
It's all under the pretext of fighting Antifa, which is not an actual organization.
Antifa has no official members because it doesn't
exist. Well, of course, this organization doesn't exist. No, I made it up. Honestly, I admit I made it up.
I was joking, and night after night it goes on. Attacks on law enforcement continue at the local deportation jail, where Antifa members, supported by the inactive Portland police, show no signs of backing down. They are creating an uprising that is causing the complete collapse of this city.
Sanctuaries. No, of course, there's no such organization. It was just a dream. We
dreamed it. Just by asserting something exists when it doesn't.
Exist. No, there's no Antifa organization, so maybe it's good for social media, but in reality it doesn't
exist. It doesn't exist on the internet, in chats on 4chan and Discord, in places like that where they run forums, exchange tactics, documents, things like that, but none of them is called Antifa.
Do you think they really act that way? Think that way? Well, what does it mean that all of them are suffering from various but mental illnesses? Or do they know they're lying and know that we know they're lying? But then you might ask, why do they lie if everyone knows it?
Knows it? So as you can see, they're all reading from the same script. They all have the same talking points. They intentionally pit Antifa against so-called far-right patriotic militias. And basically they're telling their shrinking audience to look the other way. There's nothing to see here. This is where the Trump administration changed the game by officially designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. Anyone associated with Antifa is now subject to some of the harshest penalties in the criminal code. Anyone who knowingly provides material support or resources to a foreign terrorist organization can be sentenced to up to 15 years in prison. And if the material support results in the death of any person, the punishment increases to life imprisonment.
Cars are burning, people are being beaten in the streets, armed squads are entering universities, stones and Molotov cocktails are flying. The shells have Antifa written on them. Antifa's, no, it's written. But no, it's a myth. Antifa is a myth. That's why they write Antifa on the shells, because it's a myth. And they exist, but they think we're idiots. That's right, yes. By the way, maybe I'm wrong. I'll tell you what the Trump administration is doing to neutralize this, and actually many other nasty vermin. And then hopefully lying journalists and politicians too, somehow. How?
Ever. But is the Trump administration really satisfied with just going after these useful idiots on the ground? They want the real prize, namely the ultra-wealthy leftists who fund Antifa and provide resources for anarchist actions across the country. And this is where things get explosive. Numerous investigations have traced the money. And what they are finding is a vast network stretching from state governments to billion-dollar funds and even to outright foreign enemies. Here is Illinois State Representative Brett Colebrook announcing that his investigation into the sources of Antifa's funding has just
revealed. Today, we are drawing attention to the staggering sum of over $1 billion taxpayer dollars that is being directed to politically connected non-governmental organizations, or NGOs. Concerned Illinois residents and Republican lawmakers, not state or government agencies, revealed this. With our initiative, which we call Department of Government Efficiency or the Department of Government Efficiency, the social services budget has been taken over. It used to mean helping the elderly, assisting single mothers, and supporting people with disabilities. Now it's filled with programs for politically oriented groups offering vague services like parenting mentorship, immigrant support, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer implementation. And many of them are based on race or identity, serving political agendas rather than real ones.
Needs. To put it in plain language, instead of helping those in need, those truly in need, in Democrat-run states, the allocated funds were diverted from the disabled, sick, and elderly. What are we allocating money for? To semi-shadow organizations that promise something, but what actually happened? Well, it's absolutely unnecessary. And by redirecting money to support groups that are actually fighting against democracy, against the free market, against us, the bearers of freedom of speech, well, that's what they were doing. Cool, good, nice, charming.
Guys, so Representative Colebrook has just discovered over $1 billion of taxpayer money being funneled through government agencies directly to left-wing NGOs under the guise of community support programs. Yeah, it's like United States Agency for International Development. They hide behind humanitarian aid to fund large-scale far-left
programs. In one state, $1 billion. Well, just a little billion, right? And there are several states.
50 of them.
And the Democrats came up with this. Well, besides the states, there are also the feds. The Democrats came up with this way of transferring funds to private charitable organizations. We, the taxpayers, meaning the people who provide this money, have no way of checking exactly what our money was spent on. So they use our money, but they're not required to say where and on what it's spent. And the next year, if the Democratic Party is still in power, they give them a new budget again without supposedly checking what the previous money was spent on. Either they pretend they've checked, or they already know they've checked, and say it was spent on good, important things. So it's impossible to check. We can't check. Until a very meticulous president comes along and puts very meticulous people in the FBI, the Justice Department, and so on.
People. Now here's the amazing news. We have evidence, we know who is receiving these funds, and we know who is writing the checks.
Here are those who are demanding immediate imprisonment. Tell me, does it take time to find something well hidden?
Evidence? And now we know who's next in line for prosecution. According to reports, the two main sources of funding for Antifa are George Soros's Open Society Foundations and the Tides Foundation. Both funnel millions of dollars into an organization called the Alliance for Global Justice.
Have you noticed how they always have the right names, like Bolsheviks or the Alliance for Global Justice?
As soon as you hear something like that, first, hold on to your wallets, and second, run. And then there are corporate charitable foundations with recommended donors. Strangely, they reportedly come from companies like Fidelity Investments and Schwab. Again, I'm not joking. These investment companies are putting huge amounts of money into these tax-exempt charitable funds, which in turn write checks to Antifa support networks. And thanks to their structure, the real donors remain completely, totally anonymous. In addition, there is a report that LinkedIn co-founder and major Democratic Party donor Reid Hoffman has contributed significant funds to these organizations. and also to the shadow network Arabella Advisors, which has directed more than $100 million to professional protest groups.
Organizations, we're learning a lot of interesting things now during the investigations and
unraveling. We're also getting reports that Neville Roy Singham, a former Microsoft executive who fled to China and maintains financial ties with the CCP, has been living in Shanghai since 2023. He has funneled at least $100 million to far-left protest groups in the United States while also producing CCP propaganda. And in fact, it gets even worse. A federal investigation found that Singham's funding is also connected to an organization called the Armed CCP. This is a federal investigation which is now under federal investigation due to preliminary information about an attempt on Charlie Kirk's life. So this group deleted all their social media after, of course, the suspect in the shooting at Charlie was arrested and then linked to them. And reportedly, they have ties to terrorist groups in Cuba. So we see an international element involving Cuba and China, and that's exactly what the director of the FB confirmed. And there really is an international dimension to all of this. Countries like Iran, China, Cuba, and Venezuela want to destabilize the United States and see funding Antifa as the key to this.
destabilization.
Destabilizing America from within is a constant obsession of the Democrats. And when you combine this designation with federal racketeering charges under racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations laws, you can destroy the very operations that fund Antifa while also destroying Antifa itself. So it's not just Antifa that's being taken down here. Now, at least potentially, Soros's funds are subject to the same systematic dismantling due to their material support of a legally recognized terrorist organization. Don't forget, racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations laws were specifically designed to combat organized crime syndicates. You don't just arrest street thugs. You go after the bosses, the financiers, the accomplices, everyone who profits from the criminal enterprise. And it looks like the two people connected to Antifa who were just charged with terrorism for attacking an immigration and customs enforcement facility in Texas, that's only
the beginning. That's right, gullible, hyped up, ordinary fools. Well, just tools, a hammer. We need to catch them all. But those who joyfully promoted it and those who funded these crimes need to be punished more and more seriously. The question is, how are people reacting to all this? The United States population is 350 million, with 237 million citizens eligible to vote. There are children and others too. As CNN reported to us, Trump's approval rating has increased by 1% since the start of the lockdown. Well, it may seem like just 1%. But, gentlemen, that's 2 to 3 million people. That means 2 to 3 million voters. They shifted toward Trump. And the story continues. One of the bluest states, meaning Democratic, is New Jersey, where 38% of voters, I'm talking about registered voters, not electors, are registered as Democrats, and only 25% as
Republicans. That's why no one is surprised when I say Pennsylvania is turning red. People are surprised to hear New Jersey might change. Is it true?
Is it? Yes. New Jersey is at stake. I didn't expect to say that a year ago.
You know, we launched this chase program in New Jersey, practically using all the tactics we learned in 2024. Emma from Pennsylvania, now we're heading over the bridge to New Jersey. By the way, do you know Jack Cettarelli? The more time people spend with him, the more he seems like a nice guy, a decent person, a family man. He's just a real man, really. When you talk to him, he's a great guy. Mikey Sherrill is exactly like Kamala Harris in New Jersey. Really, the more time she spends with voters, the more votes she loses. So this race is neck and neck. The polls show it's almost even, and it will all come down to two things. Can we compete in mail-in voting, and will we have the turnout that Republicans usually have on Election Day?
Elections? I'm focused on mail-in ballots, while others focus on Election Day turnout. This race is winnable for Jackie.
Cettarelli. In the last 50 years, there has only been one term with a Republican governor in New Jersey, and he wasn't re-elected. He was just elected, so to speak, I think by chance, and then kicked out. Imagine if a Republican becomes governor now, that means not a Democrat. Well, just imagine that. Well, it's insanely difficult, but look, it could happen, maybe. So, who knows, maybe people are starting to slowly realize that
something. We know that
politicians only care about
three things: getting elected, re-elected, and to higher office. Position. And they look at the equation and realize that the situation is changing. And if Jack Ciattarelli wins, they don't want to stay on the sidelines for 4 years while there's a Republican in the governor's mansion. So they see how people are reacting, they see how voters are getting interested and just aren't ready to support this progressive madness that the left keeps showing. JC, I've said this on your show before. I thought that after November 5, 2024, the left would completely change course. They would realize, hey, listen, we can't support illegals instead of Americans. We can't want men to be in women's restrooms. Mikey Sherrill is an exact copy of what the Democrats' message has been for the last 4 years. This is a huge victory for us, but it tells me that the state is shifting to the right. I don't think this is short-term. I think it's a long-term, short-term change.
Well, one of the very democratic states is New Jersey. It's moving, I don't know, maybe to the right or maybe not, just not the other way, but away from all that leftist nonsense. Well, maybe not quite yet, but the direction is clear. Which way? To be continued. But what about, let's say, in the nest of socialism, the breadbasket of socialism, California? Why only socialism, fascism, communism, actually California? Yes, and it's interesting across the country as well. But before that, specifically for the residents of California, my state, in 2 weeks we will have a vote. Obama is really urging us to vote for Proposition 50. Here it's called Proposition 50 to stop Trump, yes. So I figured it out. You shouldn't vote. You don't need to think about it. If you want, you can check, but don't vote. Tell your friends and everyone you know we absolutely don't need this Proposition 50, not at all.
We are here. 30 days before the special election on redistricting, voters will decide whether to accept the new district maps. Democrats developed them to counter President Trump's attempts to add more Republican seats in other states. This week, more than 23 million voters in California will receive their ballots by mail. As of last month, nearly half of all voters are registered with the Democratic Party, 25% of voters are registered with the Republican Party, and 22% have no party preference. However, throughout the year, voter registration and party identification have changed. Since February, 1082,000 people have chosen no party preference when registering to vote. There was also a jump for the Republican Party, which gained 48,000 voters, but the Democrats gained only 190 voters in over 200 days. To analyze these statistics and their effect on special elections, we invited Democratic strategist Stephen Mavilliu and Republican Tim Rosales. Thank you both for joining us.
For more than 200 days. Ah, I see. She joined the Democratic Party in California. Less than one person per day, that is, less than one person a day. They wanted to become new members of the party. Thank you, Sorak Vosam. 8,000 joined the Republicans. Thank you. And that's, well, more than normal, but it's kind of almost an average amount. But then where did those 80,000 people go who, based on the past, should have subscribed to the Democrats, to our party of democratic socialists, socialist collectivists? God only knows who they are. All 82,723 people registered as independents. That means they haven't joined the Republicans yet, but they've already left the Democrats. That's enough for us. So even in California, nobody wants to join the Democrats. We're still looking for them anyway. There are a lot more than Republicans here in terms of direction. It's encouraging and I like it. Here's the opinion of a Californian.
Democrat, what's going on here, and does anything surprise you about
Well, I think it's a ripple, but it's definitely not a wave. Remember, 20 years ago, 1 in 3 voters was Republican. Now it's 1 in 4. Democrat numbers have stabilized, while Republicans can only decline so much. There is definitely energy because they have a president in office who has inspired many to vote. And definitely among Democrats, there has been a weakening of positions among black people, Latino people, and young voters.
Here's a Californian Republican's opinion by Dima Torzak.
Tim, what are you doing here?
Do you see? Well, I think you can see that not only are Republicans gaining a bit in California, but also those who don't prefer any party. We've seen some success with independent voters. So people are moving toward this idea that they're not necessarily partisan, but they're ideological. They have positions and opinions, but they're not necessarily ready to join one party or another. And I think that's instructive. And as you know, political people are what we always pay attention to. And as for the Republican Party, does the president have any influence here? Well, I think the national rhetoric has its own kind of influence. And what we see at the national level, I think, is that we've heard people talk about this, that the Democratic Party is in this dispute between the AOSI wing, and you see, the old guard of the Democrats, like Chuck Schumer. And so, regardless of whose side people are on, I think some who don't necessarily belong to any camp might step back a little and ask for a bit of time. When it comes to their personal politics, their political beliefs or where they want to be, that's a problem Democrats need to solve.
That's true, but very mildly put. So, as a party, the Democrats need to decide, not for America, but in their own way. We all want the same things. A good life and security. So to speak, Americans, yes, well, they want to go a different, more collective way. I'm ready to argue to prove it first that they're wrong, but they're normal people. And those who now, if not formally, then in reality de facto, lead the Democratic Party. They want to destroy everything and then start thinking, what do we do now? Naturally, if you're being fed nasty things about Trump every day, then for now you're hesitant to join him. And with those who want to fundamentally destroy America, the people who used to be Democrats don't want to go with them either. And that's already
wonderful. George Soros, the Democratic Party, and Hillary Clinton. This is the topic of today's Viewpoint Note. As you may know, the 85-year-old billionaire is a fanatic of far-left views whose open society organization advocates for no borders anywhere in the world. According to Soros, everyone should be able to go anywhere for any reason and stay there. Recently, hackers, allegedly supported by Russia, leaked more than 2,000 documents related to Soros and his open society. The information is alarming. Soros allocated about $10 million to groups opposing Israel's policies. He provided various grants to people who literally hate the Jewish state of Israel. In addition, Soros funded investigations against people here in the United States who oppose radical Islam, such as Pamela Geller, Frank Gaffney, Liz Cheney, and Cliff May. Mr. May will be here in a few minutes. Finally, George Soros donated about $13 million to the Democrats in this election cycle. This includes $7 million to Hillary Clinton's Super Political Action Committee 12 years ago. This is what Mrs. Clinton said about George.
Soros, we have been given an extraordinary blessing, and at this moment our country needs us. And we need people like George Soros, who is fearless and ready to act when it is.
To be fair, this audio clip is outdated. The Clinton campaign is accepting Soros's money this year, as mentioned, which could be a problem for the secretary. You may recall Donald Trump was criticized for not distancing himself from David Duke quickly. Duke, of course, is an extreme right-wing hater, but now we have an extreme left-wing person, Soros, who is trying to harm Israel, America's strongest ally in the Middle East. How will the media cover this? Soros is a top Democratic Party donor. Token Points believes that the mainstream media will largely ignore the Soros story, even though it is very important. Does the Democratic Party support open borders worldwide, a situation that would make it easier for Islamic terrorists to kill wherever they want? Does the Democratic Party support the enemies of Israel? Do Jewish voters know what's going on? Again, a major situation presented to you by Russian hackers and mostly covered by an apathetic press when it comes to reporting the truth about the upcoming
elections. Again. Money, power, the silence of the press, hand in hand.
Wash each other's hands. That's why people often ask questions about who is behind these protests, who is funding the protesters, whether there is any funding, and whether some protesters are being paid. And the answer to that is yes, they are being paid. There are many layers of confusion. And for an investigative journalist, this is real work. Because many groups, such as George Soros's Open Society Foundations and the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, make donations through a so-called fiscal sponsor, which is a nonprofit organization that then distributes the funds to other groups. And that's how some groups, like Students for Justice in Palestine and others, receive money. Major sponsors, such as the Soros Foundations and the Rockefeller Brothers Funds, send money through various levels of nonprofit organizations. So when you try to figure out who the original donor is, you have to do a lot of work. I also noticed that some of the protesters who are actively involved in the student protests receive funding through scholarships from another group, which, although it posts photos and names of the protesters on its website, does not list their last names. And I was also curious when I looked at the students themselves. Many of them are no longer students at the universities where they are holding protests, and they don't have scholarships through which they used to receive money to be protesters. Basically, they don't have that on their LinkedIn pages. So there's a certain level of concealment going on. There's a level of secrecy so that you don't know who the original donors are. One example is the Open Society Foundation, which may have sent $20 million to a group called the Tides Foundation, which is known as a financial sponsor that then distributes funds to various groups, in this case to two different radical anti-Israel groups. So the point is that the original donor can say, well, I gave to the foundation.
Tides. Naturally, that's the question. Now that we have official recognition from the government that Antifa is a terrorist organization, that means everyone who helps, finances, supplies, promotes, advertises, and so on, all these people and organizations must be held accountable by law as accomplices to terrorism. We have time, we now have time, because it turns out that the statute of limitations for bringing them to justice has not expired, simply because Clinton and Obama, Soros and Biden and others like Caprest and I. Brennan don't forget. Of course they hid him, concealed him, but now the FBI has uncovered their forgeries and deceptions. And now we also have, as Cash Patel said, copies of their accounts and transfers. So we now have evidence. And we now have the right to judge all those who tried to turn America into a slave plantation with the servants of the people who walk around with bodyguards and empty guns and us. But who are we really? Why bother taking risks? Just stay still. No. Gentlemen, we will definitely move and sit, but only when we're telling you all sorts of stories on the internet. Otherwise, we won't just sit around either.